Welcome to Obology. I'm your host, Christina McKelvey. Today we speak with Lillian Isabella. Lillian is a Cuban-American playwright and actor. She's also the first known playwright with the rare disorder Phenylketonuria, also known as PKU. I talked to Lillian about her newest play, Primordial. This play premieres in February at the Tank in New York City. I encourage you to go check it out if you're in the city. This play is a documentary play based on her diverse interviews of birthing persons. We explore the ongoing themes of hope and resilience that someone who gives birth experiences, but we also talk about the impact that theater can have to enact change. You're not going to want to miss this interview. We're going to be right back. Welcome to Hopeology, Stories of Hope, Healing, and Resilience. I'm your host, Christina McKelvey. Today we're going to be speaking with Lillian Isabella. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here in New York City. It's a beautiful night.
I know, I'm across the country from you, and it's not night yet, but that sounds nice. Sounds lovely. It's a dream for me to get out to New York one of these days. I was close. I've been all the way up to Maryland, North Maryland. So that's the furthest east. Yeah. So I, follow you on Instagram, and I know your boyfriend, Rob. I interviewed him for a podcast a few episodes ago, for his movie. And, he mentioned that you have a play that you're promoting or you're creating, like you're the playwright. Tell me a little bit about that play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard very good things from Rob, so I'm excited to chat with you.
Thank you.
The play is called Primordial, and it's a verbatim documentary theater play. So do you know what documentary theater is?
I have no idea, and I feel like this is going to be my new obsession after you explain what it is, because I love documentaries.
It's like a niche genre of theater, so not a lot of people know what it is. It is basically documentary-based theater, so there's a few different forms that it can take. The one that I practice is verbatim, meaning I interview people and then I transcribe their interviews, and then I weave that text into a theatrical experience. So all of the words in the play are from the people I interviewed, and then I just sort of creatively arrange them while honoring the message, and I don't change the order or change what they were intending to say, but I just put them in conversation with each other. So Primordial specifically is about pregnancy and childbirth. So I interviewed many people about their experiences with pregnancy and childbirth. And then I turned over 1,000 pages of transcription from my interviews with them into a 50-page play, which runs about an hour and 15 minutes or so.
Oh, an hour and 15 minutes. So these are interviews that you conducted with individuals, again, about the theme of pregnancy and childbirth, and transcribed that, and now it's a play. So, two people talking or acting it out. Tell me more about that process, because it sounds like it would be long.
Yeah, I've been working on the play for 4 years now. For me personally, it's the longest I've ever worked on anything in my life. And so, it's been a long process. And the way that I envision it, it's going to be going up at the Tank in New York City in February 2024. So February 1st to February 25th at the Tank. And the plan is for there to be 5 actors, and there's over 30 characters that are represented in the play. So each actor is going to play like 5 to 7 different people throughout the course of play.
Okay. So, and is the Tank theater is modeled off as like a community theater, or is it, how's that set up?
Yeah, the Tank is an off Broadway space. So a lot of people don't know the difference. I learned it. I went to NYU Tisch School of the Arts, and I majored in acting. And that was where I learned the difference between Broadway, off Broadway. So the difference is literally the number of seats. So the theater space that we're going to be in has 98 seats in it. And off Broadway is 99 seats or above to a certain point. So we are one seat away from off Broadway. And there's a lot of reasons to do that. One of which is like budgetary. So the kind of contracts that you would do with actors is different if you're in like an off Broadway or an off Broadway house. There's a lot of different rules and things that go along with the different types of houses and the contracts that happen. But it's an amazing location. It's 36th Street and 8th Avenue. So it's just like a few blocks away from Times Square. And it's very much in the theater district, in the theater world. So it's going to be, and the tank itself produces so many artists and projects come through the tank every year, like thousands of artists. And they have a certain small limited number of core productions. So things that they co-produce, and this play is one of their first for the new year. And so it's very exciting to have that drive and that support, and to be accepted in that way as a co-production is like a really big deal. And I'm so thrilled. I'm so excited that that's happening.
I'm excited for you. That's a big deal. Going from, and is this your first play that you've written?
My second. So it's my second full-length play. So my first one, it includes a curse word. I'm not sure if I can. You can. There's no rating. So my first play was called How We Love / Fuck. It went up at Cherry Lane Theater in 2019. So right before the pandemic, the fall of 2019. And it was also documentary theater. I interviewed many, many different people women about their experiences with sexuality and intimacy. And then I turned that into a play. And so that was my first one that went up. And then this is the second full length one.
And so you said documentary theater is very niche. And so there's not a lot out there. What would I get from going to maybe specifically Primordial, but a documentary type theater versus a documentary on TV or a movie?
Yeah, well, I'll point to one of my absolute favorite documentary theater artists. You may have heard of her. Her name is Anna Devere Smith. She is a complete badass. And what she does is she focuses, and this is a lot of documentary theater focuses on topics that are kind of rubbing up against the grain of what is normal in society, government, and culture. So it's often challenging norms. It's often, centering the civilian or the person who is living within the society, and kind of highlighting and amplifying their voice, and exploring and questioning why the status quo is the status quo. And so Anna Devere Smith, her style is very much, she does verbatim theater, where she interviews, uses their words, and plays. She also acts as them, which I've done in the past, but in this new play Primordial, I'm not doing that because I wanted to just be the playwright and just kind of experience it as the playwright only, and not also a performer. But Anna Devere Smith will embody her characters, and then she'll expose kind of patterns or assumptions, or like the way things have been structurally set up that and invite questions. So documentary theater, you asked like, how is it different than watching a documentary film? I think one of the biggest ways it's different is that you have bodies in space bringing these stories to life, and you're listening to real people's experiences. So there's an element of trust that comes into play, that you believe that the documentarian, the documentary theater maker, has done justice by the people that they've interviewed and is accurately representing what they were intending to say. And I think that similarity between documentary film and documentary theater, but there's less. This is an interesting thing for me to say. I almost feel like there's less artifice maybe with theater than there is with film, because with documentary film, you can kind of like shape narratives, or it's a complicated question what you've asked. It's a complicated question, but I think there's something about theater where you're in the space together, and you're feeling like there's other bodies that are channeling these stories, and you're kind of witnessing it firsthand, even though it's not firsthand, it's like secondhand, but it's still, there's some magic in having a body share a story. And there's something else that's a really cool thing, and I can't remember exactly who said it, but it's a very famous like theater essayist, theater person, and he says that when we go to the theater, and we're watching something in the theater, the audience's heartbeat sync. So your heart's beating at the same time when you're watching something in the theater. And I think that that's a very magical, beautiful thing. So
your heartbeat is syncing together. It's that you're all connected, and you're witnessing, like you said, this actor in this space telling this story that is real. And so I'm depending on how well the actor acts, that emotion that plays into it. And then the audience is also feeling that emotion, that empathy that's coming from the actor. And it's just like real stories.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's something about theater, I think, where you can't look away. Like when you're watching a movie, or especially if you're watching it at home, right? Like in a movie theater, it's a little different, but you can go to your phone, or you can hit pause, or you can walk away. And there's something about when you're in the theater space, you really are being asked to put aside an hour and 15 minutes of your time, say, to witness this story and to be present with a group of people witnessing the story. And you feel their immediate reactions, and you feel the energy of the performer. And there's like a transmission that happens that is more visceral, I think.
Yeah. It's making me excited. Like, go down to my local playhouse.
Or local theater.
Yes, I definitely want to. I saw a really lovely play, Jane Eyre, at the Yavapai College in Prescott. You say Prescott here, not Prescott. And it was magnificent. And you're right, there was that energy. And then when the person was singing, you just felt that emotion because you were there, that the screen is gone. Oh.
I love that. The screen is gone. That's such a beautiful way to put it. Yeah. I my choreographer, so we have a choreographer and a director, and we just had our first creative meeting for the play this past Monday. So we're starting to throw around ideas of it and getting ready to put out a casting notice for actors. That's very much the phase of the production that we're in.
Okay.
And the choreographer said to me, she was reading a certain scene in the play when all the characters were getting ready to go into labor. And she said she started to feel anxious, and she was like, whoa, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can be involved with this play because this is really intense. And then she said she made it through that scene to the next moment, and she was like, oh no, I absolutely, that she realized the feeling, because she's been pregnant and given birth. So has my director. My director's been pregnant and given birth. I've never been pregnant, and I've never given birth. So I'm approaching it very much from the lens of somebody who's investigating, who hasn't had that experience. So I also don't have like a predisposed sense of what it should be or could be or was, because I've never experienced it. But my choreographer said she realized what was happening to her when she was reading that was she was having the memory, like she was having that physical memory and that feeling of the panic and the sensation you get when you're about to go into labor and start pushing. It's very heightened. It's very amped. And then she was like, that is a beautiful thing for an audience to all collectively feel together, is this sense of, oh my God, it's about to start,
Anticipatory anxiety altogether.
Yes, exactly. The reason that I created this play is because I wanted to, it's kind of like a love letter to my mom. And, she told my sister and I our birth stories, how we came to be, quite a bit from the time when we were like young, and so when you go out in the world, nobody talks about birth. Like, right. You don't talk about the experience of being pregnant or being born. It's like a secret, or it's something a lot of the people I talked to said that they didn't feel like anyone wanted to talk to them about their experience at all. Nobody asked them questions. And they felt really frustrated because they'd gone through this completely life-changing experience. Yeah. And then crickets, like nobody acknowledged that it happened, that it was epic, nothing. They didn't ask them questions. So my goal with this play is to literally put birthing stories center stage, and to ask us to listen and to talk about it and to feel and to acknowledge and to witness this like freaking transformative event that is happening all the time. Yeah. Millions of people are born every single year.
No way, really?
Yeah.
Shocker. I wonder if it's because women are giving birth. I wonder if that's why.
Yeah, so a lot of things that affect the female body are not talked about a lot, and not prioritized and not centered. And I also through this play, I also spoke with a trans man and a non-binary person who both gave birth as well. And it's this sense of like marginalized bodies. It happens to people who have marginalized bodies and marginalized experiences. And I don't understand completely why it's marginalized when like half the population gives birth. It's not a marginal thing. And every single person on the planet, the one thing we have in common is that we were born.
Yeah.
Like it's so obvious to me. Like we all were born. It is, why the heck is it not the center of how we structure society or like try and understand society? It's like magical. It's how we all came to be, you know?
What would that look like if we were to, focus on being born? Because you're right, it's marginalized bodies it's pushed to the side, and those with female reproductive organs that can give birth or birthing people are pushed to the side. But it's something that we're all, like you said, we're all born, every single one. I don't know one person not born.
Possible.
Yeah, maybe, And so what would society look like if we were to be like, oh, this is kind of important, or how, we need to structure society around this very, very important thing?
Yeah, I always say I'm not an expert in this area. Like, I'm not a doula, I'm not a midwife, I'm not a politician, I'm not any of these things. And so I'm a playwright, and I'm creating this and trying to explore like what would it look like creatively, right? If we were to center this and to talk about it. I think it would be humbling. I think it would be encouraging of conversation. And like one early feedback I got from staged readings of the play is that people immediately wanted to call their mom, like after they saw the play, and just call them and just say like thank you and just say I love you. I think we'd have more appreciation and honoring of the people who gave birth to us, whether they are our mom or they don't identify as our mom, but just the people who raised us. And I think it would be a society that was more respectful, that was more caring. Like we would have like better pregnancy leave, like for people after they've given birth. We wouldn't expect them to bounce back right away because we would have an understanding of the trauma that can be the experience of birth, and like really acknowledge. We pretend, I think, that birth is something like, I don't know what do we pretend birth is like? Just like something like, I did my taxes, I gave birth today. Like, what? It's such a different thing. It's like, and I think if we knew that and we talked about it, we would honor birthing bodies more, and we would treat people with more respect. And also maybe we would love each other more. I don't know. Is this too wishy-washy? But like, we would care. We all, that's such a precious act, and we were all part of it.
Yeah, we're all, like you said, everyone has been born. And I think it would also it seems like this play would give great perspective for those, because I don't have children either. I've never given birth, what it's like, and help with that empathy building.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I think this play, it's going to need to come with a big trigger warning, because there are a lot, and there's a trigger warning on the podcast episode too, but there's just so much that can happen also that's disturbing or traumatic, and there's also so much joy and delight that can happen too. But there are a lot of experiences that we cast judgment on, or that we try and make political policies on, that we're not attempting to understand from a personal place or from an empathetic place. And so to your point, I think if we just allow people to talk about it, and we just listen, and we take it as their personal story rather than like a political statement that they're trying to make, that it will open the door for like increased understanding and compassion in the way that we govern, in the way that we like talk to each other and about each other.
Yeah. You mentioned that this story was a love letter to your mom. Tell me more about like that connection, with maybe your own story of being born, or, how it affected or impacted you to re-understand your story.
Yeah. My mom's story is in my play. I interviewed her, and she's in the play. She's one of 30-something people whose stories are there.
Oh.
I interviewed way more than 30 people, but I just got 30 stories in there.
How many people did you interview?
I interviewed like about 50 people.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I'm just like really enthralled with this type of play. That's so cool. So you interviewed your mom.
I interviewed my mom and her stories in there. And, one of the things that affected her story deeply was she enjoyed being pregnant very much. She didn't have health insurance and she was poor at the time. She was working at a laboratory as a scientist. So she was getting her PhD in genetics. And she didn't have, they barely pay you anything as a scientist when you're in training. It's like a pittance. And so she didn't have a lot of money, and she didn't have a doctor. She didn't have she went to a health clinic, which is like a clinic for poor people to help them out. And then when she was in labor, she came into the hospital as essentially like someone off the street. Like she didn't have a connection to anyone in the hospital. She didn't have a preset doctor or anything like that. So it was hard for her to navigate, when she needed painkillers or when she needed extra support. They refused to help her. They refused to pain medication because she didn't have health insurance, and so she wouldn't be able to pay for it. And so it was an antagonistic relationship in that way. And, for her, it was like a difficult experience to have that happen. And then she said when I was born, that there was a lot of joy, and it like made everything else worth it, right? Because she got to hold me and she felt so happy. But that dichotomy of not feeling heard and not feeling taken care of when you're at your most vulnerable, when you're experiencing like one of the most difficult things that the human body can possibly do, and one of the most miraculous things that the human body could possibly do, in my opinion, and to not have support, is disturbing. So
yeah, go ahead.
But I really value like my relationship with my mom is informs a lot of my art, because I grew up in a matriarchy. So it was me, my mom, and my sister. We didn't have like, a father figure in the house. And so I grew up in a world where women, my mom, myself, my sister, we were prioritized. We were the center of things. We were her stories, our stories were the central narrative. And then I went out into the world and it's like, surprise, like that's not the way things operate. We're in a patriarchy.
Opposite.
Yeah, and then it's like you get kind of labeled as a feminist because the way I grew up was at odds with the way society was set up. And I was like, okay, yes, sure, I'll take on that, whatever. But for me, it's more like didn't make sense. And so I'm always with my art trying to question and navigate and understand why things were the way they were for my mom, and how matriarchy is in conversation with, and how can it be in whatever, that kind of thing. So it's an exploration. It's a love letter to my mom in the sense also of the feminine finding their footing and thriving. And there's so much more complicated way of understanding it now than I think there was 20 years ago culturally, right? Like it's not just women who give birth. There's all sorts of identities that give birth. And so for me, creating this play has been a learning journey in that as well. Like it's not just the feminine or the female. There's all sorts of complicated, layered dynamics within a patriarchy that are not understood, that are not centered, and all this stuff. So
like you mentioned with you interviewed someone that was non-binary and trans person as well, and that their experience and their bodies were marginalized. And what did you learn through that experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I told one of my friends, like, I'm trying to avoid this play becoming political. Like, I don't want to make people feel angry, and I don't want to but I'm ultimately not in control of how people feel after they watch the play. But I've had in some outreach, I've had people express anger to me because I use the term birthing people, and they're like, how could you say that anyone but a woman gives birth? Only women give birth. And I'm like, well, no, I don't argue with them, but it's an inaccurate statement. And I like part of the process of creating this play has been educating myself on like, terminology and things that are out there, and realities of people who are not talked about. Trans men have been giving birth for decades. Like it's a thing that's been happening for a very long time. And so it's just like, I think people get used to whatever their silo is and whatever their circle or their bubble is. And it's like, there's more to it than that. And it's been a learning process for me as well. So, yeah.
I'm curious, like the resilience those individuals you interviewed probably had, or other individuals as well that you interviewed.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of resilience. And, the non-binary person that I interviewed, their stories in the play. And one of the things they talked about is that they were very frustrated when they were pregnant because people would look at them as if they had the gift of life, and they're like, stop it. Other people would look at them and everything was in pink, all the things that they were
gendered.
So gendered, and so were so annoyed because the world was relating to them as a woman, and they did not identify as a woman. They identify as a non-binary person. And so it was like very annoying, and they had some body dysmorphia because their breast tissue started to come back, and all of these things that were going on. So it was a very challenging, negotiating that transition, and that experience was very different for them than for other people. And so, and something that I always say, like I said it earlier in our interview, but I'm not an expert in this area, and I've learned so much. But one thing I'm trying to do is I'm actively scheduling guest speakers for Q&A talkbacks after the shows.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah, and I'm centering as much as possible the people who are experts. So organizational support groups for, loss. So sometimes when someone goes into labor, trigger warning, right? They'll lose their baby, or, they'll have a miscarriage, or all of these things. And so I'm having I have a support group that's going to speak to loss. And then I have another support group that's going to speak to building, the Centering Healthcare Institute came on as a sponsor of the play. And they're an incredible organization that's shifting the way prenatal care is approached for birthing people, so that they create groups of pregnant people that follow the journey together, and they support each other throughout. And they came on as a sponsor, and they're going to help with the talk back and all this stuff. So I'm trying to, as much as possible, center the people who are the experts afterwards, connect people with resources, because I think theater is also its most powerful when it's connected with civic action of some sort. Tell me
more about that. Theater being the most powerful when it's connected to civic action. That's so cool to hear that statement.
That's cool. Yeah, I think when you go to the theater, it has the potential to really rouse you, to excite you, interest you, to make you feel something, to shake you out of whatever your normal day-to-day pattern is. And I think sometimes somebody might want to be able to take action or do something with that. And also sometimes somebody might be having an experience, or they might have a loved one who is experiencing loss, for example, or who is wondering if they should get a midwife or a doula. And so knowing that there's an organization out there to support them that exists, that's doing this work, because there are tons of organizations dedicated to maternal health and to all of these things. And so civic action to me means connecting people with resources and avenues for expression that would be helpful for them, and to let them know that they're not alone, and to plug them into community, because there's so much community, and theater in and of itself is a community and builds community. And so, just networking, connecting all of the networks together, and having them feed each other, kind of.
Theater helps increase the empathy. You're in community with each other, and then you have these resources at the end. And you mentioned the support groups, with different topics and themes.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, and how is this similarly set up as, I can't speak, but is this very similar to your last play? Did your last play follow a similar framework with those resources and stuff like that, or?
A little bit. This one's different. I think the last topic was a little more controversial. And so the last play was a response to the Me Too movement. So that was extremely important, and it brought a lot of vital things to light. I was utterly shocked that men had no idea that this was happening, because growing up again in a female household, I heard stories from friends and family members of abuse and all these things happening. And so for me, I was like, oh, yep, this is the way it is in the world, and you have to be careful as a woman, right? So the Me Too movement was essential, but it was also it talked about a lot of traumatizing things. And so it made me question, sex is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be something that we enjoy. So what does it look like enjoying it? And I had one Q&A talk back for that show, and it was very successful. We sold out that night. And we had 4 guest speakers, 2 men and 2 women, who were specialized in sexuality and in intimacy and all this stuff. And so we had that one talk back. It went really well. And that gave me the idea for this one to try and schedule a few of them, because it led to us selling out and to people having a robust conversation after the play. So it felt really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having, like I said, that support and with the different themes. Because it sounds like you probably heard all sorts of stories during your interviews. Yeah.
Yeah. For both plays. It's like, whoa, I learned that.
Mm-hmm. And that spectrum, like, for your current play, Primordial, the spectrum of stories, you have loss. You mentioned stories of loss.
Yeah.
And stories of typical births, whatever that looks like, births with disabilities. It sounds like you have kind of the whole gamut there.
Yes, yeah, we do. There's a story of somebody who was a quadriplegic who gave birth to twins.
Wow.
Yeah, I was just trying to cover as many possible angles as I could, and knowing that like a diverse range of age, ethnicity, gender identity, physical ability, just as much diversity as I could get, knowing that it's impossible for me to completely like get the entirety of all the experiences. And every once in a while I'll be like, oh my gosh, there's this story that I didn't get in, or this experience. And I'm like, at a certain point I need to
Yeah.
like, this is what it is, and it's not everything, but it's a good attempt at all of it.
Was that the trash chute?
Yeah, that was I tried to speak louder.
Oh man. Trash chutes. That's so cool. I don't have one. I have to walk outside my door.
I'll give a little context in case that makes sense. I live in and I live next to the trash chute for the whole building, and there's 12 floors. So sometimes trash will come hurtling down. And then I also live right next door to a church. So every half hour there's church bells that go off. It's very New York City.
Sounds like a wonderful experience. So those of you that are not in New York, you're getting the New York experience vicariously right now.
That's right. We won't edit it out for you.
Yes, nope, it'll be the experience. What is that type of play? Immersion.
Yes,
immersive experience.
Exactly.
So I think that's just really awesome that the play you're creating is promoting awareness. It's showing the resilience birthing individuals go through birth and how they can bounce back after adversity. Because, like you said, you showed that whole gamut. What were some themes of hope that you saw, with the play or the interviews? Excuse me.
That's a great question. I think some of the hopeful elements of it are some people really took their birthing experience into their own hands. So they really they worked with a doula or they worked with a midwife, and those experiences tended to be more positive. They tended to feel more supported throughout the birth, and they were able to carve out experiences for themselves that were flexible and adaptable to the emergent needs of the situation, but that also like took into account what would bring them joy, in a sense, like what would make them feel good. There's one story in particular of this woman who she danced when she was in labor, and that helps because you're moving, like the baby is trying to make its way out of the birth canal. And that means that there's going to be like, it's a small birth canal. The baby's way bigger than the birth canal. And so it's going to be bumping up against your organs, and it's going to be trying to get out. And again, I'm not an expert in this, right? I'm not a doctor, but generally so when you're dancing, it helps, like you're helping to move, you're helping the baby. It's like you and the baby are partners in trying to get the baby out of your womb and to being born. And also dancing, and also like physical touch from your partner, if you have that supportive relationship, can allow endorphins to be released, and it allows you to feel. There was a woman who experienced ecstatic birth, so she actually had the feeling of like an orgasm while giving birth, where things were brighter, things were pleasurable, because she was moving her body and she was helping get the baby out. So it was like a joyful, ecstatic experience, and it was a lot quicker than her. She gave birth 4 times, so each birth was a different experience, and She also had a birth where she was forced to, like lie down, and it took a lot longer. It was very traumatic and disturbing. But this one was like a more ecstatic birthing dance experience. And she started this whole company that it's called Dancing for Birth. And it allows people to dance and to get into the movement and support the rhythm of what their body feels, and to get into the good feelings. So that's one really joyful, hopeful experience. And then there was another woman I talked to who's actually also a friend of mine, and she talked about hypnobirthing. And so hypnobirthing is practice ahead of time, and you get your mind into a space where you're like breathing and you're focusing on visuals, and you go to a place in your mind that helps you deal with the physical pain. And then there's you breathe in time with the contractions, and it's a whole thing. And she also had a doula who was able to help her with that, but she really practiced ahead of time and was able to get in touch with more, she said, my friend says, who did this kind of hypnobirthing, she said, you would never run a marathon without training. You would always train for a marathon. And so she treated giving birth as like something she needed to train for, because it was going to be a physical marathon. It was going to be the most hardest thing she'd ever done physically. So trained for it mentally. She got herself into a place where she would be able to have tools and have things that when the day arrived, she would be prepared, So.
Wow. And so that helped with, just, it sounds like that, even that resilience, like that bouncing back.
Exactly. Yeah. It helped her have a sense of control in a situation that is wild. It's just a completely, the name of the play is Primordial, because it's something that's been happening since the beginning of time, is giving birth. And it's a very wild and raw and natural thing. And so, it helped give a sense of control and also like preparedness for it, knowing that you don't know what's going to happen in the moment, but you have tools to try and manage it. So.
Yeah. And society, it doesn't always set up birthing persons with those tools to be able to prepare for birth. And again, because I think traditionally it's, if men were giving birth, it'd be different. I'm not trying to get political either, but
it's also, and it's like there's a way, I believe, to talk about these things that is not political. And you run into a problem if the only time you're talking about it is politically, because then you're never going to get to solving and healing the wounds. You're going to just be like trying to debate stuff. And it's not a debate. Like, it's, at the end of the day, it's people's experiences. It's like lived stories are, I think, the most important thing. That's why I do documentary theater, because that's what I believe is the most important thing.
Yeah, lived stories. I like that. I'm going to try and go to a documentary play. I don't know if there's any in Arizona, but that's now my new life goal, is to experience a documentary play, because again, it's that quote you said, where all hearts are beating at once, or gets on the same rhythm. Yeah, that lived experience.
Come see my play. No.
Yeah, it's February. I said work trip. Sponsored by me. The podcast. I mean, I think it's beautiful. And, birth is such a great symbolism, I believe, also for that hope and resilience and healing, and just rising from the ashes, something new, something to hope for future generations. And so it's really great that you're doing a play like that's focused on this.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope it's hopeful. My goal is for when somebody finishes watching the play, that they feel slightly overwhelmed, because it's going to be a lot of content. So slightly overwhelmed, and also with a sense of they need to talk about it more. They need to talk to their friend about it. They need to call their mom. They need to ask a question. Because ultimately, I think conversation, like authentic, direct conversation, the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to get uncomfortably intimate about really important life topics, is how you create change and transformation in a society. Yeah, you have to be willing to get uncomfortable. You do. And raw, right? And real. And I think that's so important. Yeah. And if you're not uncomfortable, if you don't go out of that space, there's not really any change. Yes. 1000%. Yeah. So that's one of your goals for the audience, is that they are able to experience that discomfort, but in order to create that conversation, to create change. Yeah. I want to make people feel a little uncomfortable and a little inspired.
Uncomfortable plus inspired equals change.
I think so.
Yeah, why not? I love it. And that's why the arts are so important, playwriting, books and theater and movies, songs. The arts are a way to be able to instigate that conversation in an open way and create that change.
Yes. Yeah, 1000%. There's this in my last play, one of the people I interviewed is a tantric expert, and she talked about how she looks for ecstatic experiences. So she looks for experiences that pick you up and shake you around, and when you put it back down again, your molecules are rearranged. And like, she doesn't want to just have the "oh, that's nice, thank you" experiences. She wants to have the experiences, and then you're transformed in some way, in moderation, and in a healthy. Like, the thing I love about theater too is that for me, theater is safe. It's like it's a safe space where you've agreed on certain rules. You've agreed on there being a stage and there being performers and there being, a set and things, and that you, as the audience, are agreeing to sit there and watch the play and to take it in and to trust these artists with a bit of your time. And I think that agreement, like having that safety in place, allows you to explore really tough topics, really transformative topics, because you understand there's a container, and the container is agreed upon ahead of time by everybody. And so then you're safe to have an ecstatic experience because you know what the rules are, and you've had a baseline understanding of what the experience is, and you've opted into it. And I think that's essential for that kind of a conversation or experience.
Being able to feel safe while getting shaken up and your molecules being rearranged.
Yes, 100%.
I love it. Love it. Well, Lillian, we are getting too close, but I feel like I can talk to you forever. I like to ask this question to all my guests because my podcast is called Hopeology. What gives you hope, or what brings you hope?
Oh, I love that question. I think what brings me hope is when people are willing to talk to each other, when people are willing to initiate conversation, and when people are willing to listen. And I'm also just like more immediately hopeful about my play. And I feel like hopeful that institutions like the Tank support independent artists who are doing things that are outside the norm and put their full support behind it. That brings me hope too, because there's so much that's changing right now with artificial intelligence and with, a million different things that are happening, like the strikes that are going on right now with the guilds and the unions, and they're so important. And like really supporting artists and supporting independent artists, and that there are still institutions that do that, brings me hope.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And it's been a joy having you on the podcast today. And yes, go check out her play, Primordial. You said February
1st to February 25th in 2024.
At the Tank.
Yes, in New York City, 36th Street and 8th Avenue.
So go check that out and get that immersive experience where your molecules are shaken up and you leave wanting to help enact this change.
Thank you so much, Christina. You're amazing. I love chatting with you.
You too. You too. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Hopeology. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave us a review. To learn more about us or listen to past episodes, you can find us on all your podcast streaming stations. If you are interested in being a guest, or if you have any feedback, please email us at hopeologypodcast@gmail.com. You can also support our show by clicking on the link in our show notes. Please also follow our Instagram page, Hopeology Podcast, and visit our website, www.hopeologypodcast.com.